Let's play Fortune and Glory, the Cliffhanger game. Fortune and Glory is an adventure game where 1 to 8 players, 12 if you have the expansions, travel the world looking for artifacts in an Indiana Jones adventure fashion. Fortune and Glory is a great game, but it has lots of variations on how to play and numerous rules that you might forget, so the video is intended to help you set up your game and remind you of the key rules. If you're just learning the game, I have a set of videos in a playlist called Fortune and Glory Mastery Campaign. It teaches you the game in a kind of campaign style where you level up by learning the game. It's also a fun way to jump back into the game if it's been a while. I'll post a link to the playlist at the end of the video. Before we actually jump into the setup, let's talk about the different styles of play and the different levels. First, we can break down the styles of play into competitive and cooperative. The cooperative is built upon the competitive gameplay, but it adds the AI that you will combat. There's also a team game that's described on page 26, and with the base game, you can play with 8 players, but if you have the Treasure Hunters expansion, you can play with a total of 12 players. It's based upon the competitive version, but you compete as teams. Now, if you're playing solo, you can play true solo or multi-handed. And the rules on page 26 explain how to play solo based upon the cooperative version. However, you can also play based upon the competitive version. So here's how you can do that. On page 27, it shows optional rules for scaling the villain track and fortune totals. Now, in the competitive game rules on page 11, it shows that you win the competitive game by gaining 15 fortune. Now there's a villain track marker, but you can use it here and use the ring to mark how many rounds it takes you to gain 15 fortune. So you just move up the marker for each round that you play. That will then establish your baseline. Now every time you play, you try to beat that baseline. Using the optional rules, you can also change the amount of fortune that you need to receive to either make it easier or harder, as well as move your baseline up in terms of the number of turns it takes you to win. So those can affect both the difficulty and the playtime. When you're playing solo, especially true solo, there may be cards that will come up that refer to other heroes or seem not to apply directly to a single hero. You can include yourself typically, but if the card doesn't make any sense, then you can just draw another card. Now, we've talked about how the game can be divided into competitive and cooperative modes. But there's also levels of complexity, such as the basic game on page 10. The advanced elements is described starting on page 18. But there's also the expansions such as Treasure Hunters, which add personal missions and docks, and the Rise of the Crimson Hand, which adds major city epic events and a new set of villains. Okay, now that we understand the different styles of play, let's go ahead and jump into the competitive setup for the basic game. It's described in the Quick Start rules. All other gameplays are based upon that. For the setup, get out the map and all the cards. Also get out your tokens, including the glory tokens, fortune tokens, wound, danger and success, and the auction tokens. On page 10, it describes the cards that you should remove when you're playing the basic game. But basically they wind up in being the temples and the villains that you don't use during that basic game. So you won't use the deck of villain cards, you won't use the villain or mobster and Nazi figures, you also won't use the temple and the collapse and exploration jungle, deep jungle token, as well as the zeppelin. And this brings up an interesting point. If you have the full set with the expansions, you may have a number of cards already mixed in together. And so to play the basic game, what's easier to do is just when you come across a card that you don't understand or don't remember, just skip it and go to the next card. For my game, I created trays for the cards and for the tokens. These aren't needed, but they will appear in the videos, so I'm just telling you about those. So during the setup, the cards that you'll get out are the Allies, Gear, Artifact, Adventure, Event cards, the Danger and Cliffhanger cards, Enemies, Nazi enemies, Locations, City, Common items, and you've got the reference card that has both a cooperative and competitive game sides. The cards you won't be using in the basic competitive game are the personal missions that came with the Treasure Hunters expansion, the villains cards, and the villain event cards. The villain cards and the personal mission cards are used in advanced gameplay, and the villain event cards are used in the cooperative play. In the base game, there are two special double-sided cards. One says Nazi soldiers and the other one says mobsters. And on the reverse side, it says Zombies and Order of the Crimson Hand. So these are not to be confused with the Nazi enemies and the regular enemies cards. As you're playing the game, if any card refers to Nazi soldiers specifically, it means this double-sided card. If it refers to mobsters, it means this double-sided card. However, if it refers to Nazi enemies or enemies, it refers to these decks. If you have the Order of the Crimson Hand expansion, it has another double-sided card that has Dark Creatures on one side and Crimson Assassin on the other side. Each player should select a hero card and a figure and place the hero in the starting location shown on the card. Now draw the artifact and adventure card. Read the flavor text for the adventure card. Then place the artifact on top of the adventure card. Draw a location card and choose a set of skulls. Place one of the skulls on the artifact and place the other skull on the location where the artifact resides. Do that until you have 4 artifacts placed. Make sure each player has a gameplay reminder card. Of course, make sure you have your dice available for your skill checks. That concludes the setup for the basic competitive game. Now let's talk about a setup of the advanced elements. If you're playing the advanced version, you'll use temples and the jungle exploration tokens, as well as the villain deck and the villain figures. But none of these will be affected in setup. They will just come in as the cards describe. The only one that's in the setup is the Zeppelin. Notice it's the Zeppelin side, not the War Zeppelin side. And this will be placed at a random location. Although jungle tokens aren't used in the setup, if you draw a location that has a deep jungle symbol, you will place extra fortune on the artifact. If you're playing with the personal missions from the Treasure Hunters expansion, each hero gets to draw 2 cards and pick one, discard the other. When you complete a personal mission, you gain the reward, and then you can draw another personal mission card. You cannot draw 2 and select one. You cannot ever have more than 1 personal mission, and if you ever do, you will have to discard down to 1. If you're playing with the docks from the Treasure Hunters expansion, shuffle them up face down and place 1 token on each port city on the game board and put the rest to the side. Whenever a hero is in a port city with a dock token, they can investigate the docks after they've done their city event and before they do anything else. If you're using the major city epic events from the Rise of the Crimson Hand, it doesn't affect setup, but it does affect when you arrive in a city. If you draw the Just Another Day in the City card, you resolve the effect, and then you roll a 6-sided die and resolve the effect shown based upon the city that you're in. Okay, now let's talk about the cooperative game, which adds another level of complexity to the game. The rules are explained on page 22 of the rule book, including the winning conditions. The first thing that you'll need to do is select the vile organization that you're going to go against, either the mobs or the Nazis in the base game, or if you have the Rise of the Crimson Hand, the Order of the Crimson Hand vile organization. These tiles are referred to as the vile organization sheets, and they describe how the vile organization works. Now, first I want to talk about the Nazis and the War Zeppelin. Now, the regular Zeppelin is used in the advanced standard competitive game, but in the cooperative game, if you choose the Nazis, you use the War Zeppelin, which is on the other side. Now, the other thing to note for these vile organization sheets is this section that talks about the outposts and how they are set up during the beginning of the game. So each of the outposts has a tile that's associated with it based upon the vile organization and a major outpost. So for example, the mob has the Mob HQ, Nazis have a secret base, and the Crimson Hand has the Dark Sanctuary. Now, in addition to the headquarters, the mob has hideouts that are described on this side of the outpost tile. The outpost tile or record sheet is double-sided, and on the back they show the tactics for the vile organization. On this side are described the occupation tokens for the Nazis and the influence tokens for the Crimson Hand. Next, get out the villain track and the villain track marker and place the marker on space 0. Notice that on page 22 there is a chart that shows you the number of villains that you will be playing with and the fortune that you'll need to gain in order to win the game. It also shows you the villain level, that if they achieve that, they win the game. Shuffle the villain cards and place them to the side to form a draw deck. Based on the vial organization, choose 2 or 3 villains as shown on the chart and place them out on the table. Take the figure associated with the first villain and place them at the artifact with the highest fortune and lowest danger. For the second villain, place their figure on the ready status. If you have a third villain, place their figure on the delayed status. Okay, now that you've finished setup, let's talk a little bit about gameplay. The quick start guide has some great information about the gameplay in the middle and on the back, as well as the reference cards for both competitive game and the cooperative game, and some more about the cooperative game is shown on the back of the rule book. While the rule book is the definitive guide for answering all questions, I have created a reference guide that makes it easy to understand the skill tests and the different elements within the game. So it's organized by topic, and I put it on Board Game Geek. Finally, let's give a quick review of some of the key rules of the game. Basic skill checks. The basic skill test is shown by this kind of symbology. Each hero has a skill level on their chart showing the number of dice that they can roll to pass the test. The word shows the skill that needs to be tested. The number shows the value that is needed for success, plus it means that value or greater. And the X symbol shows the number of successes that are required. As long as at least one die is successful in the roll, you can continue the test. You can place markers down on the card to show the number of successes and then roll again. If there are still successes required and yet your dice do not meet the passing value, then you have failed the test. For the danger cards, you must flip it over and go to the cliffhanger. Red X's mean that the test is a deadly test. This means that all successes must be achieved in a single roll. On deadly tests, you can double exert, which means that you spend 2 wounds for each extra die that you roll. And that can be done after you see the initial results. On cliffhangers and escape tests, you can single exert, which means that you take 1 wound for every die that you want to add to the roll. For fight tests, heroes and villains use their combat skill, and enemies use their fight dice. The white and green colored dice makes it easy to separate the heroes from the enemies. During a fight, you will hit with a 4, 5, or 6. However, defense blocks 1 hit. During a sneak test, the hero will pick a number that they think that the enemy will not roll. The enemy will then roll the number of dice that are shown in their search skill. The hero is found for every die that matches the number that the hero chose. Typically, that means that they will have to fight the villain 1 round for each die that was found. The bottom corner of ally cards shows their loyalty level. If they need to pass a loyalty test, the loyalty test will show you the value that needs to be rolled in order to be successful. The hero will then roll the number of dice matching the loyalty level. If at least one of the die matches the level for success for the loyalty test, then the loyalty test is passed. An event card is drawn if you roll a 1 during the initiative phase or the move phase. In the solo game, you don't have an initiative phase, so instead you roll 2 dice during the movement phase and you choose which die you want to use. If one of those dice is a 1 and you decide to use it, then you draw an event card. If you roll double 1s, you draw 2 event cards. If you roll doubles of any other kind, you draw 1 event card. If you finish your movement on a land or sea space that is not an adventure site, then you roll a single dice, and if you roll a 4, 5, or a 6, you draw an event card. If you roll a 1, then you must immediately draw an enemy card and fight that enemy. D6 damage means that you take the amount of wounds equal to the value shown on the die rolled. D3 damage means that you take half of the damage shown by the dice, rounded up. Using the revised tempo rules, whenever you must face a cliffhanger, you roll the number of dice equal to the danger level of the temple, and for every 4, 5, or 6 that you roll, you must place a collapse token on the temple. When the number of collapse tokens equals or exceeds the danger level of the temple collapses, and all heroes must escape, and villains and acolytes are removed from the board. Recall that heroes can exert when trying to escape. When villains are adventuring at an artifact site, they roll the number of dice equal to their search value minus the number of heroes that are in play, and then for every 4, 5, or 6 that they roll, they add a danger token if it's a normal artifact, or gain a fortune if it's a temple, and they gain a wound for every 1 that they roll. Whenever a hero is adventuring at the same site that a villain exists, they must use a sneak test to get past the villain. For every die that the hero is found, they must fight the villain 1 round. Whenever a hero is adventuring in a deep jungle, they first add a deep jungle token to the artifact and roll the number of dice equal to the number of deep jungle tokens on the artifact. If they are a roll of 4, 5, or 6, they're successful in finding the artifact. If, however, they roll a 1, 2, or 3, they're unsuccessful and their turn ends. On their next turn, they can add another exploration token and try again by rolling the number of dice equal to the number of tokens. They continue in this way until they find the artifact and can begin adventuring, or until they walk away. Villains and acolytes do not have to search for artifacts in Deep Jungle. We assume that they've already found it. During the end phase, acolytes gain 1 automatic success at normal artifacts, or gain 1 fortune at temple artifacts. When seeking to attack a dark sanctuary, or to sneak aboard a Zeppelin, whether it be the regular Zeppelin or War Zeppelin, you must actually choose 2 numbers during the sneak test. They must fight an enemy for every die that found the hero. So, for example, on the Zeppelin, they would fight Nazi soldiers, and they'd fight the Order of the Crimson Hand when trying to attack the Dark Sanctuary. And that concludes this video. Don't forget that I have a playlist called Fortune and Glory, the Mastery Campaign. It's a series of episodes to walk you through learning the rules of Fortune and Glory. And it's just kind of a fun exercise that kind of takes you through your own campaign where you level up. So I hope this video has been helpful. I'll put a link for the playlist at the end of this. And enjoy playing Fortune and Glory, the Cliffhanger game.